what are your thoughts on the visit from JD Vance in München?
Yeah, it's so I think it was important. So I heard verses like, it's just a provocation and shouldn't, carrot. I think this is not true. It's actually quite significant. I think this speech will live in infamy because it has been really radical. If you think it through and read through it, a couple of things are really important. One, I think we see something that I would call as a populist international movement that he's addressing there. So in the end, he's appealing to his fellow right-wing populists in Germany and in Europe and elsewhere. And he's basically telling the German chancellor and the German minister of defense, like, you don't have democracy anymore because you have the Brandmauer against the AfD, and this is not how it's supposed to be, and you're no longer democratic or whatever. That's basically an interference in domestic policies of a partner country, which would have been, absolutely unthinkable just 10 years ago. It's a major breach of international diplomacy.
Sovereignty.
Of sovereignty. It's an attack on sovereignty, and it's a disregard of how we actually work together as partners, right? And he spoke as a representative of government. He wasn't any random dude. I mean, I comment a lot on US politics. I'm a private citizen, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. But he's a government representative, and this has been quite a breach of more than just diplomatic niceties. This has been quite a thing, and it you can ask yourself, like, what's the ultimate consequence of this interference in domestic policies? How are you supposed to react as a German government to that? It's quite a sting, and I think it's significant because it erodes a lot of the trust and the foundations that the transatlantic relations have actually been built on. That's number one. That's called into question. Number two, if you think about the proposals now put forward with regard to Ukraine and Russia, basically an opening move by the Trump administration. Hey, let's sit down bilaterally and we will figure out with the Ukraine, we don't even give a damn what the Ukrainians and the Europeans think about it. That's a second major concern, because in the end, and there's even the let's say the perspective of involving China in a settlement to secure a frozen conflict settlement, whatever it looks like, basically inviting China into playing a major role in Europe. I mean, it's kind of crazy stuff, right?
Yeah.
But it seems to be a real. I saw some comments on this that this might actually be a good idea. Whatever. It's hard to actually compute what's happening there. Overall, I think again the main problem is. There's a kernel of truth in all this stuff. That's the problem, right? Of course, Europe has not spent enough on defense. Of course, there is a need to come to, let's say, to break the stalemate and to come to the table with regard to Ukraine. The war should end, right? And that's all true. But the solutions offered here are so toxic and are so corrosive with regard to transatlantic relations and the order that we have all benefited from after 1990. And there is no alternative vision, as I said before. I mean, what are you actually proposing as an alternative? Is it really spheres of interest where you divide the world and say hey, Russia, you can have Eastern Europe, do whatever you want, and we as US care about Panama and Greenland, and China? I don't know. Is this really the world that we want to enter? I think that's a debate that we need to have, and ideally we would have that first as close allies before we actually, the US goes over the heads of Europe and affected countries and is trying to, do a deal that's then dropped on everyone else.
Once, I don't know where I read that it was bad to be an enemy of the United States, but it's worse to be their friend.
I don't know. It's, I'd say, the relationship has always been, we have different interests, and that's fine, right? We had converging interests over the last decades, which was great. Now interests seem to diverge, but I'm actually not quite sure why the US is or the Trump administration,
so bullying,
is so much focusing on bullying in Europe. I mean, literally, if you look at the problems that the US has, and it has many, Europe is not really one of them. I mean, this is kind of show me why Europe is a problem to the US. We are a force multiplier. If you want to replicate the assets, the military assets that you employ pretty cheaply in Europe, I mean, from the hospitals to the, basically you have access to a whole world region based in your, on your allied structure in Europe. You need to build a lot of plane carriers or whatever to replicate that kind of stuff, right? So it doesn't make sense to alienate Europe, and that's what I really think. There is no logic behind it, and there is no vision behind it. It's just the bullying of someone who's first picking the weakest in the kindergarten to actually bully, and that's not a very smart strategy. And I'm not apologizing like Europe being lazy and spending not spending enough on defense, but I just don't see the rationale behind it, and that's what's worrying me.